There was an interesting news report yesterday that sort of was vaguely in the category of something that I have opinions about, and they were discussing the topic of children with conditions in schools and what to do about children with conditions in schools. And by conditions I mean those that are a bit disruptive, those who require a bit more love than all the other kids in order for them to progress through their day. Because of course the child, although they have a condition, it's not their fault they have a condition, and they do deserve to have the same rights as all the other children. Just as the parents have the same rights to send their children who have a condition to a school, the same as all the other parents get to send their kids to a school. But of course, at what point does a teacher feel that they're overwhelmed? At what point does a teacher feel it's no longer their responsibility to teach a child with a condition? To what extent should a teacher be in a position to teach a child with a condition? And you enter into a problem of expectation, in that as a society, do we expect our teachers to be fully understanding and qualified in dealing with all the different conditions that any child could possibly have? Or should the teacher just have the traditional expectation of that if a child is for whatever reason too disruptive for them to normally cope with, for them to normally provide their equivalent amount of love for, then that child has to go to a different specialist school? To which of course specialist schools, there might not be enough places for everybody, because specialist schools require specialist teachers and specialist facilities, which is a much more finite resource than general teachers. And so an idealistic argument might be, could we find a way to make it so that all teachers were able to be fully conversant with all the different conditions a child might have, and be fully trained to deal with all of them, so that they could find a way to make the child with the condition not so much of a disruptive element. That might be what you would call an idealistic ambition. And in that particular scenario, obviously, I have no opinions. And my thoughts on that particular matter aren't particularly relevant, because I personally don't have any kind of those conditions. And I don't know anyone who does, in my close circle, as it were. You know, I'm not a teacher, so I cannot talk about that topic in a solution sense. However, I do have experience of a similar nature, which is pretty much the same thing, in that I was in the workplace and I encountered a sudden crusade of morality that started affecting my workplace. And this particular crusade was security. It happened while I was a security guard, which I did for many years. In that one day, after a few years of being a security guard, they suddenly said that all the security guards have to have basic first aid training. And of course, nobody went into security with an idea that they were going to suddenly be involved in the medical profession. But it was just this, wouldn't it be nice if all security guards had first aid training in case they ever encountered a situation where they could possibly save somebody's life? Wouldn't it be nice? Just as wouldn't it be nice if all teachers were fully able to deal with whatever condition came through the door? And of course, to implement this for security guards, it was just a few hours training at a course once every few years. And then all of a sudden, you're then supposed to be capable of saving people's lives because you've done an afternoon's course. You know, I'd raised the topic at the time. I'd say, isn't this a bit silly? What's the legal ramifications of me getting involved in one person's individual health and safety crisis? If I'm going out and doing some compressions, if I crack a few ribs and it turned out that the condition wasn't serious enough to require compressions and all that kind of thing, then am I liable? Who's liable? Am I helping anyone? Has somebody thought this through? And of course, it goes without saying that every human being on the planet has a different extent of memory. Not everybody is born with a photographic memory. So from this one course, let's go a year down the line, and you encounter somebody having a medical emergency in the workplace, and it's like, I did this course in the afternoon a year ago. Was it 1,000 And then how long to wait? 1,000, 2,000? Bee Gees, Staying Alive? I can't remember. Panic. You know, that's not helping, is it? And of course I'm a bit squeamish as well, don't really like the idea of blood or the human body generally, really. Would me rushing to somebody bleeding out and then getting there and then rushing away to vomit in a corner, is that me doing my job, or does that mean I'm then going to be fired? To what extent is it my job to get involved now because I've had some basic training? Am I going to get fired if I don't get involved? And all this kind of stuff. And expectations, you know. And it's like these highly moralistic expectations that are, from a practical point of view, quite impossible to expect everybody on the planet to adhere to. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody went through school and got first aid training and knew how to save XYZ person in XYZ situation? Well, I don't know really, because at school the people who had a mindset for medical help probably would have funneled themselves towards working in the health industry. They probably wouldn't have funneled themselves to end up working in security. The people who would probably be good at that probably wouldn't have become security guards. Just like the people who would have been good at caring would have gone into the care sector, whereas those who are good at teaching would have gone into the teaching sector. And somebody going into the teaching sector doesn't necessarily think I'm going into the caring sector. But of course it's very difficult to argue against because it's such a high moral position. The wouldn't it be nice is so, it's like a cover-all, there's no argument against it. And it's like, well, wouldn't you, if you were in that situation, you'd want somebody there who would help you out and save your life. And of course I'm not allowed to say that. To be honest, if something happens to me, it happens. I'm that kind of person where, you know, I understand that shit happens. And ideally, whoever gets to me, I would just hope that they were capable of doing what it is that they're hoping to do. The extent to which I have to wait for that is not really as big a factor as just hoping that the person who's doing things to me while I'm having an emergency is doing things for the good, and they're not just being overconfidently incompetent and doing more damage than they're helping with. An overly confident incompetence would be just as bad as no help at all, possibly worse. And then from a very cynical point of view, of course, is it nothing to do with a high moral ground? Is the high moral ground actually just a cover for extreme cynicism? It's just a way of getting cheap paramedics. It's just a way of finding a way to pay paramedics less because their skills are more common now. With a wider pool of people that can perform the same skills, you can therefore devalue the more premium paramedic. And likewise with the teachers, could it just be seen as a way to communalise the premium care costs? Obviously, having specialist centres for children with specific conditions is more expensive than running a normal school with non-conditioned children. But let's assume the morality is genuine. Let's assume that the morality comes from a place of crusade, of genuine moral crusade. Wouldn't it be nice? Like with Rishi Sunak's recently, while he was Prime Minister, he said he wanted to make it his government's goal that everybody had a set level of maths by the time they finished education. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to burden teachers with children that are incapable of learning math, and then expecting them to have provided or prove that these children have a certain level of math before they leave school? A high ideal, but in practical reality an impossibility, because just some people just can't do math. Because not everybody can do everything. And even from this high moral ground, you've now got a situation where potentially you have people coming out of education and then choosing what to apply for. You've now got the security industry needing to poach people from the medical profession, because in order to be a security guard you have to be a basic paramedic as well. And so anybody with a healthcare mindset is now available for security and health, but people without a healthcare mindset, they're just now not going to do either. They're going to go and find a different job. So essentially you're reducing the amount of people that end up in healthcare because there's another sector now trying to poach them all away. And similarly with teaching and care, you could have a situation where people leaving school and they want to be carers, but now the teaching profession is poaching them away from the caring profession because the teaching profession now needs essentially carers as well. And the people who left school wanting to be teachers but not necessarily carers, they're going to go and find something else to do because they weren't expecting carer to be on the job description, just as a security guard wasn't expecting paramedic to be on the job description. And all these wouldn't it be nices, they all sort of started about 20 years ago. Prior to 20 years ago, all the different professions were quite obviously separated. You lived your life and you expected the respective professional to get involved in the situation that required the respective professional. And people didn't really muddle all the different professions up. But about 20 years ago, this whole wouldn't it be nice thing started, where essentially they're trying to get everybody to be good at everything. And the thing is, I don't know where it came from. I don't know who's behind it all. And I don't know what their reasoning is. But I've always felt that it's an ideal, but it's not a reality. And I don't disagree that it's a nice ideal. And if in 50 years' time, maybe everybody will be good at everything. Who knows? Maybe I'm being a bit of a Luddite in this regard. However, I think you shouldn't set ideals that are, from a practical point of view, impossible. I think that puts too much pressure onto too many workers. And a lot of these high ideals, they are pretty much directed at the workers, at a certain level of the workforce. Those in the trenches of the workforce, as it were. It's creating burdens of pressure that are not equivalent to the pay scale, as it were. In that these policies arrive with high ideals, but from the perspective of the person in the workplace at that basic level of employment, is it just another excuse to find a way to tell that person off? Is it another way that the employer can just find a way to fire them? That teacher wasn't able to handle that particular conditioned child. That's their fault, off they go. That security guard wasn't very good when that person had a medical emergency. Off they go. And you could go through your entire career without ever encountering a medical emergency, or being a teacher and encountering a child with a particularly difficult condition. But just the pressure that you could do adds a daily burden to the mind of the worker. And the problem is that when these high ideals start to circulate and find their way into all these professions, as individuals, how do you stop it? How do you say, well, I like your idea, but I think the practicality of it is technically impossible. So, nice idea, wouldn't it be nice? But no, I don't think we're going to implement that. Who do you even speak to formulate that kind of opposition to it? Because it's obviously not a political thing, and it's not something that involves votes necessarily. There might be government guidelines possibly, but these kinds of things aren't really political party based, are they? Any old party can do them and bring them in. If they're the bad guy political party, they might do it for cynical reasons. If they're the good guy party, they might do it because they genuinely believe that humanity can be all these things. I suppose the solution might be, can the workforce, who are going to be affected by any wouldn't it be good policy changes, wouldn't it be good if the workforce could be canvassed beforehand? Couldn't they have asked all the security guards who have their security guarding licence to participate in a survey as to whether they would like to have the expectation and burden placed on them of being a first aider and first responder, as well as being a security guard, and not phrased in a mealy-mouth way of wouldn't it be nice if, but actually spelling out what it implies to the increased potential worries and pressure and workload. And then if that workforce rejects it, to then say, oh well, wouldn't it be nice it didn't work out, rather than just forcing it through.